Yo, what's going on? Today I'm talking with Jess McClain, professional marathoner for Brooks, who recently competed in the USATF Half Marathon Championships. That race was important because it was a selection event for the World Road Racing Championships to be held later this year, and top 3 would be selected for Team USA. Now, Jess finished 4th just off of the podium, and it's a position she's all too familiar with. A lot of you guys will remember that she came in 4th at the marathon trials back then as an unsponsored athlete. And she also came in 4th after picking up a sponsor in the track trials in the 10,000 meters. So she was a double alternate for Paris. In this bonus episode, we'll talk about her race in Atlanta, what she was feeling as she was going through the race, and how it felt to come in 4th again. But we'll also talk about some of her other running accomplishments, like her 10K road championship and her second American finish in the New York Marathon, where she finished 8th overall. We'll also get into the shoes she's running and racing in, as well as what her plans are for the next couple of months as she gets ready to run the 10 at the end of this month, and then ultimately run in Boston for the marathon. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Jess McClain. Jess, how's it going? It's been 9 days since the half marathon in Atlanta. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you so much for having me on. I feel like we've been in the same vicinities of races and haven't crossed paths, so it's so nice to meet you on here, and hopefully we can meet IRL sometime soon. But yeah, feeling great since the race.
Well, I mean, this is our first time meeting and talking, but I have seen you pretty much everywhere in Orlando, in New York, and in Atlanta as well. So it is a great time to finally be able to sit down and have this conversation.
Yeah, so awesome.
So let's start off with something easy for today. Did you go for a run yet?
I did. I ran with some really good friends this morning. I've had a low-key week of work, so I got to start at 7:30 a.m., which is a treat for me. That's sleeping in.
All right.
Yeah.
What shoes did you run in with today?
I ran in the Glycerin 22s. They are so good. They're new. I love them. I've pretty much run in them every weekend since I've got them. But I do have a good shoe rotation. But those are at the top right now.
Okay. So I still haven't tried the Glycerin 22s. I've had them kind of in the queue for shoes I need to review soon. But I've only been hearing good things about them so far. So it's exciting.
They're so
to hear.
great. Yeah.
Can you
awesome.
tell us a little bit about what else you're reaching for, like on a weekly basis?
Yeah, it's so funny. I have quite a rotation. I'll reach for the launch 11s, the most recent launches. I'll go for just like the basic Hyperions as well. And then for workouts, I'm pretty much, ripping everything in the Hyperion Elite 4 PBs, which are out, and I'm pretty sure pretty much sold out on the website at this point, but I love the PBs, and then I'll actually do a decent amount of work in our Hyperion Elite LDs, the spikes. So I've got quite a big rotation, which I didn't used to have, but I think it honestly makes my feet and body stronger.
A question about that though, like the launch 11 and the regular Hyperion, like the tempos, or I guess they're just called Hyperions now. How are you using those differently? Because I see those as like very like analogous shoes, just maybe different foams. Do you use them kind of the same way and just switch between them, or is there a different like use in your mind between those two shoes?
Yeah, I use them pretty interchangeably. I think they're pretty comparable. I'll use them for steady runs where I want to, if I'm typically easy runs or anywhere, and I mean, some days it could be like 8-minute pace, down to 7:15. But I'll do my, quicker, steadier runs. I'll reach for those launches or those Hyperions. But oftentimes if I'm going like straight to the gym, I feel like the Hyperions are the best shoes, like for the gym. Like gym work, I just feel like they give my feet enough stability, but there's not so much cushion that I can't feel my feet working. So yeah, I would say they're pretty similar. But I love, it's like funny, I couldn't get rid of both, or one or the other. So I just keep them both in there.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's start talking about the half marathon in Atlanta. This was your debut half marathon. Did I have that correctly?
Yeah, I think I've run the 20K in New Haven. I ran the Phoenix Rock and Roll Half pacing a friend. I don't know if I've run one before that, honestly, but I guess technically it is, as close to a debut as you can get.
Okay, because on the elite start list, they had you as having a marathon time, but not a half marathon time before the race. And I was like,
Okay.
that can't possibly be right.
Yeah, I think it is.
But so you ran like a rock and roll half marathon?
Yeah, I raced that. Gosh, was that January? Yeah, one of my good friends and training partners, he wanted to run sub 112. So I was like, I'm just going to pace you to 5:30s. And then if I feel good towards the last, like the latter half of the race or the last 2 to 3 miles, I might just, rip it and have some fun for a little bit of a last stinger part of that race. And I think I ran like 72:05 or something.
Okay.
But yeah, it felt pretty controlled. So, but it was good to like get the distance under my belt, even if like it was in a pacing capacity. I thought that was it was good intel to get.
Okay. But you're a Phoenix native, is that right?
I am, yes.
And your first marathon was your local race, the Mesa Marathon?
It was the Mesa Marathon. Okay. It's been discovered. I feel like everybody comes to Mesa now.
It's a great time of year. I love running in Phoenix. I end up in Phoenix in the winter like every year, at least for a little while, for the past, I think, more than half a decade at this point. I just love running there. But for that marathon, you kind of ran that just for fun. But you ran it kind of secretly under your maiden name. Did you do that the same thing for this half marathon, or was it under Jess McClain for this one?
No, I ran this marathon, or the half marathon at Phoenix was this year, and I raced it under my new married name. So yeah, no hiding anymore. But yeah, for Mesa, I just, I had taken a step back from the sport, which I feel like everybody knows, and then I just feel like if you're a competitor, you just get the itch again. And I just kept getting these like Mesa, pop-ups on Instagram. And I'm like, okay, I should just run a marathon before I turn 30. That'd be awesome. I think I was turning 30 like 2 days later. So I entered under McClain. I'd gotten married, a few months before that. I'm like, nobody will know. This will be awesome. No pressure. And it was honestly great. I feel like I did it for me and it was really fun. I learned a lot, which I feel like that was a really good way to do the distance, like not have a ton of pressure on having this perfect and orchestrated, like 8 to 12 week build. I think I did a 6-week build after our honeymoon and detoxed, from all the Mai Tais, and then just figured it out, and it was super fun and a lot of things went wrong, but it gave me a really good starting point, I think.
Fast forwarding to getting ready for Atlanta, the half marathon there.
Yes.
What was the build like for you on this race?
Yeah, it's been a super interesting build. I think it's been the most diverse build I've done for anything. I was training myself up until the New York Marathon in November, and then I quickly realized how the spring was unfolding as I was planning. And I'm like, I have no idea how to train myself for an indoor 5K, a half marathon on the roads, a track 10K, and then Boston. So I was kind of, having conversations and ended up connecting with David Roach, and it's been super fun. So his training is awesome. I feel like I do a little bit of everything. I do a lot of what gives me confidence and what I love, the longer reps, the long runs, the things that are in my comfy zone, but then I'm doing, 20% of the things that I was too scared to do, honestly, up until this point, or tap back into. So it's like the extended hill workouts, the really fast, mile reps at 5K pace. There's so much that I've just diversified in my training, and I think that's kind of helped me level up. Again, I haven't done most of this stuff since my first stint as a pro, so I think it was the right time to start incorporating it all again, and I think it's showing. But yeah, training was pretty diverse, but I have kept the long run in there as like a motif through it all. So I've made sure to prioritize that the whole time.
So then coming into Atlanta, what was the kind of the race plan and what were the goals, keeping in mind that you have a lot of different things kind of on your plate in the next, or I guess for the first quarter of the year, first half of the year. So What were some expectations for you heading into this, knowing that it was a selection race for the World Road Championships? What was the plan?
Yeah, great question. I don't put too much pressure on myself anymore in terms of, making the team and getting top 3, or of course, like that's just a known factor. I want to make a team and I want to be competitive. So it's more about getting more specific on the goals. Like, what do we want? What are the outcomes that we want? And what is the knowledge gain that we want from running on this type of course against this field? And I think it was the perfect Boston prep, honestly. Like, the hills were insane. I didn't look at the course map until I talked to David on the phone the day before. I just knew it was hilly. I didn't know the extent of the climbs. Like, he's so good at the trail stuff that he's like, oh yeah, there's a few hills in here. Like, the grades are not like these are tough. So I think a lot of it was practicing like the patience over the first 5 or 6 miles, which is honestly hard in a half marathon. I still practice fueling. I signed up for, personal bottles, which in a half is not, you can go one way or the other and just pack a gel on you and be fine. But I wanted to practice like grabbing the bottle, getting it down. I've upped my carb game, like my intake a lot. So that was something that I wanted to focus on this race. But ultimately I wanted to get to miles 9 and 10 and feel like I had raced smart enough and conserved enough to like be a factor in the latter half of the race. And a lot of what I've been doing speed wise has given me like that extra 5% over the last mile. And then of course, once I realized I was, I was in fourth again, it was a funny moment, but it was so cool to see Amanda, who I love so dearly, make that team. So it was a great day. I would have been happy with a sub 70 on that course. It was freezing. It was windy. As a person from Arizona, that's like, least favorite conditions to race in, but it was good to come away with a lot of intel, feel really good, come off of it well. And just now we're building for the sound running 10K, and then everything is like with Boston in mind in April.
All right, can we dive into the race a little bit in more detail, break it down a little bit more for me? I guess we could start at kind of the starting line. I mean, you mentioned like cold is not your favorite. You've raced in cold conditions. You raced in New York in the fall last year. But some of, I guess, the races where most of us know you better is from when it was hot. So like in the trials in Atlanta, in Orlando, and then at the 10K at the trials. What were your concerns kind of going into that? I saw a variety of like levels of layering happening in the pro field. What was some of your thoughts and concerns?
With the cold factor, a huge part is the warm up, like staying warm, timing the warm up really well. The conditions were tough. The tent was, once all the bodies got in there, it was warm, kind of hanging out before people went off to start their warm up routines. But I ran a little bit longer than I would usually do for a warm up, but I'm glad I did. I ran like 25 minutes probably. Did more drills than I usually do. I love the marathon because I literally run 10 minutes and skip around for a few, strides, and that's it. But I made sure I was really warm. I really got, my food in early. I didn't want to have to worry about GI stuff. And then, a lot of the start, road races are tough if you're in the cold because they get you, they want to do proper introduction. You have the national anthem, all that fun stuff, but you're standing on the line for like 20 minutes. You're kind of just like standing in place, bopping around, doing strides where you can. So you're just trying to stay warm. Most of us had layers on up until the very last minute, until we got like yelled at. And then I actually ran with hand warmers like inside my gloves. And I noticed a lot of women, they were, as we were running, people were tossing them like they had started with them too. But the starting line, I feel like it always helps. Like once the gun goes off, you kind of forget about all the things that were maybe at top of mind, like right before that moment. So once the gun went off, the field was big enough to make it feel like a true race, but small enough to make it feel like you could easily navigate the start line and get in good position. And there was I would say there was a solid pack of us for, quite some time, at least for the first bottle station. I remember having to navigate a decent amount of bodies. But start lines are always so fun. It's such good vibes. And you have like the whole, public waiting to race before or behind you. And it's so great.
Looking back at the footage of the start, it seemed like it was one of the least bumpy starts in terms of people jockeying for position. Is that how it felt for you?
I would say that's fair. Yeah, that's a fair assessment. I definitely remember hearing things from Houston and, Most of my marathons have been relatively small on the start line, so I haven't had that moment where you're literally, throwing elbows and making sure you've got space. But yeah, you had more than enough room. I think most of us would rather be like in a tight pack just to conserve heat for as long as you can and, bear or take on the elements together. But yeah, it was great. It was super great.
And then I felt like the women's race, well, the women's and the men's race, I think they each went out faster than a lot of people thought they would go out. Is that the sense that you got? Because you were still with that front pack, right in there for at least the first kind of 10K from what I saw.
Yeah. I made a conscious effort. I think Wayne she made a decisive move at maybe like 5.5 or right around 10K. And it was just a little bit too early for me based on how I felt. I honestly thought I wasn't going to feel good that day because it took me about 6 miles to get warm, like physically. So in the moment, and I knew the latter half of the course had, the sizable hills in it. So I was like, this just isn't the right time for me to go with that move yet. And the half marathon's still a little bit of an unknown to me. But yeah, hindsight 2020, yes, I wish I maybe tucked on or held on to the, few people who kind of were just a little bit back from Wayne and maybe rode that wave a little bit more. But I would say it was a sizable pack up until like mile 5.5 or 6. But yeah, I went out quick.
Yeah. And then it seemed like you were kind of in that same position, like once the front pack started to kind of stretch out a little bit. It seemed like you were kind of in there for a while, but then eventually you caught Wayne, like I think in like maybe in the last mile. Is that right?
Yeah, it was like the last 2, maybe like 1.5 or 2. Okay. Yeah.
What's kind of like going through your mind when you know that like someone that's just recently broken the American record is in front of you and you're still holding on, fighting for a position? Kind of like what's going through your mind at that point? Can you let us know what that's like?
Yeah, it's so funny because even in Orlando, like there were a few people that I caught up to and, I was hoping they'd come with me and like get a second wind and we could run together. And, I was processing like who I was getting close to and maybe passing. In the quicker races, gosh, I feel like I black out. Like I just know there's a body in front of me and I'm like, reel them in slowly, like just keep your eyes up. But I did notice obviously that it was Wayne and I don't want to discredit where I'm at and my fitness, but I was like, she must be having, an off day or something must be going on. Because when I passed her, it seemed like she was laboring and I was like, oh, just, obviously we're all competitors, but you feel for people when it's just not their day. And I know there's going to be days where I feel like that and it's just part of the sport. It's tough. But then, each time I kind of do catch up to somebody or pass somebody, I want to make sure it's like a definitive move and it's not something I'm trying to decide on in my head because that just takes so much energy. So I'm just like, use it as like a slingshot and like momentum, like just use that momentum and keep moving forward. And honestly, I think we were getting close to once you saw the stadium, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, I think they were like, that's a mile to go. And that's all I remembered about that course preview was like, that means you're close to a mile to go. And I'm like, okay, I can do anything for like 5 minutes at this point. Marathons make things seem a lot shorter. So I'm like, we got this. It's mostly downhill. And I just kind of used, the downhill and when the wind was at my back, as much as I could. Yeah.
And then you ended up finishing 4th, which it has been an unfortunate, I guess, fortunate or unfortunate theme for you. 4th at the trials, 4th in the 10,000 meters, and then 4th again here. Yeah. When did you know that you were in 4th place?
Oh, as soon as I passed Wayne and I saw Amanda up ahead of me, yeah, I knew. But it's one of those things where like I couldn't change anything from my race. Like you can't change how the race unfolded, and I ran the best that I could and the smartest that I could in that race. And yeah, maybe there's decisions I could have made differently, but no, we're sending an awesome team. If I made the team, it would have been great. It would have fit in, to whatever fall schedule ends up unfolding well, but like I'll be totally fine. The 4th place thing, I'm excited to shake it when it does happen, but like like even the day in Orlando it was so amazing, and like getting fourth couldn't take anything away from that. And that's been like years in the making. So I just am so fortunate every time a race goes well, in terms of just like, I got what I wanted out of this race. I'm so far along in my career where I'm like, you have to kind of savor those moments and celebrate them. So I felt like Atlanta was great, and I got exactly what I wanted out of it. I got to watch Amanda make her first team, so it was all good.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I remember very vividly about the finish line of this race, and I guess anytime I've seen American women performing well, it's always a theme. So it's not unique to this race, but it was kind of like the camaraderie and the congratulations. You guys are all competitors and you're working hard, but like crossing the finish line, some people are making teams, some people are not, but everyone's there to kind of support each other. And I saw you give Amanda the biggest hug once you guys crossed the finish line. What was that moment like?
Oh, it was so awesome. I feel like, finish lines are special moments. Like I watch your videos on YouTube, and I feel like it's all the moments that like in outside the races too, or in between, that you don't realize are so special. And I feel like finish lines tell so much of a story. Like Orlando was crazy. You had women crossing and just throwing up, and crossing and getting into a wheelchair. And like, I mean, people gave everything that morning in Orlando. And in Atlanta, it was so cool. I feel like I got to watch Amanda have her moment. And I just know that that's like the start. Not that she hasn't done anything special up until this point. She totally has. But I just like know once you have a moment like that, like how much it propels you forward and motivates you. And like, I know what's coming for her, and it's so special. But and then Taylor had her first big moment, which is insane. And then you had Emma, Emma Grace Hurley. She's been so close so many times. And I'm like, it's just cool when it happens for people. And we all see each other so much. And it's like, if you're not lifting each other up or enjoying being around each other, like, what are you? Competing is great. Obviously, that's why we're all doing this. But I think it's so fun to embrace your competitors and people around you too, because we're spending tons of time together over the course of these weekends.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is it's like it makes work a really unpleasant place to be otherwise,
Yeah. I've had jobs where it's like, it's a job, you get in and get out, you don't, which is totally fine. But I'm like, I don't want running to be that way. I want to enjoy it and, embrace all of that. So.
And it seems like you are really enjoying, I guess, kind of like the second phase of your pro career. You're having a lot of fun to go along with your success. And I don't think it's because you're successful that you're having fun. It seems to me the other way around. It's because you're successful because you're having fun, right? Is that right?
I would agree. Yeah, there's been some really rough moments in my career. And it wasn't just like, oh, it was a tough race or a tough workout. Like, it was 6 months. It was a year. It was like long stints of being pretty unhappy and not enjoying it. And I just realized during COVID, like how much joy running brings to my days, when that was pretty much all I had during the pandemic. That brought some sort of joy and normalcy to everything we were all going through. And it kind of snapped me back. I was like, why did I settle for not having fun while doing this? And of course there's the pressure, and when you sign a contract out of college and it sounds so shiny and rainbows and unicorns, and then you're like, oh my God, this is my like way of living. Like, I have to make sure that I'm performing and like not getting hurt. And I think I just let that kind of like rest on my shoulders and stack so high that the weight, it just got like too much to bear. And I didn't know how to handle that, because running had always just been like ancillary to a lot of other things that I did. And then I got to a point where like I got married, I'm around my family again. I have awesome friends. I love to work. Like, I love my job, and it's okay that other things bring you joy. And running is literally the best part of my day. Like, I get to start on the run and then go do all these other things. But like the days where I'm not running, like my days off, I'm like, I definitely feel weird. Like, it's good for my body in the long run, but I'm like, I love to start my day with runs. So yeah, it's got to be fun. And some days aren't. totally get it. Like, we don't love every single day. Some days are tough. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun. And the minute it's not fun for an extended period of time again, I'll know what the warning signs are, and you'll most likely see me, take a step back again. But I'm hoping that's not anytime soon. So.
And so one thing that I wanted to touch on is that you're currently signed with Brooks, and it seems like everything's going really well.
Yeah.
You raced in the Hyperion Elite 4 PBs for this race, is that right?
I did. And then I was racing in, I believe what Erica raced in Houston, I raced in those for New York, the HE5s. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Why did you pick the 4 PBs for the half? Is it because of the shorter, faster distance race, or is there something that you prefer about the shoe overall?
You know what? It was funny because the PBs have felt like, it's like they just feel like home for a shoe for me. Like how Erica feels about the 5s is how I feel about the 4 PBs. Like they mold perfectly to my foot. I raced the 10K road champs in those and they felt amazing. But I think in my mind, I just felt like the HE5s were faster and the next best thing. And I was like, I kind of want to wear these for New York. Like it's a freaking world major. Like these are fast shoes, and I wore them in track workouts and they felt really good. But I kind of wish I stuck to my like ride or dies, my 4 PBs, because they just feel so good on my feet. But it's funny because there's definitely like people who are HE5s and 4 PBs at Brooks, like CJ. I think he sleeps in them. He loves them that much. Like he loves those things. He runs in, I think, pretty much every run in them.
I mean, if you told me that CJ Albertson sleeps in his running shoes, I would not be surprised. If you were literal about that, I'd be like, that tracks. That tracks.
He's so great. Yeah.
Love that guy. But the question I wanted to get to was, before I got distracted,
Me too.
is that like you signed with Brooks now, but the first time you were a pro, you also had signed with Brooks. And so
I did.
What was that kind of decision like? Was it like, did Brooks change? Did you change? Or like, how did you get to the same place twice?
Oh, interesting question. I like that. Coming out of college, Brooks was definitely, it just made the most sense for me. I loved the team. I visited headquarters in Seattle. I loved that they had a true, HQ somewhere that I was just super intrigued by Washington, to be honest. I thought it was beautiful. It was different than what I'd been exposed to, so I was excited to move there. So everything just felt right. The training was, I was primarily a track kid, so I was focused on the 10K and 5K, so it made sense at the time. And then, I signed in July, I think 2015, and then I was there up until the end of 2018. And I'd been on like a cycle of getting injured. So it was kind of just looking in the mirror and being like, okay, this team and like Brooks isn't going to change. Like it's not on them to change. Like I need to figure out like what is going on, in my body and in my head. And it was one of those things where it's like, I could keep doing the same thing, expecting different results, or I can, move back to where I know I'm happy and figure everything out and get my body right. So that was I just needed to make a tough call. And it's unfortunate. Like I felt like I was giving up 100% and it was tough, but it's funny because now I feel like, I never stopped running in Brooks. Like I have run in Brooks ever since I left and started in 2015. So I love the shoes. I love the brand. And I just saw what they were doing around the trials and, building up not only like the Hansons team members, but all of those who are running on their own. Like you had Colin, you had CJ, you had Erica, you had Des. And I was like, oh, I blinked and like Brooks kind of blew up and are embracing people at different points in their career. They have families, they have other things going on and meeting them where they're at. So I actually went to the Hyperion house at Orlando and I saw some of my old, colleagues from Brooks and old teammates from Stanford that worked there. Garrett Heath, who's the director of sports marketing, he and I, have Stanford history and Brooks Beast history together. So I was like, oh man, Brooks is like, it just felt good again. I was like, that's kind of weird, but this is great. And then they were pretty much the first true conversation I had post trials. I was not looking for a contract. I wasn't doing it for that. But everything felt right. And I didn't feel like I had to sacrifice who I am now as an athlete or outside of that. Everything that I kind of brought to the table, they were like, yeah, makes sense. Like, we'll figure it out. We'll support you. And then they're doing things like, last month we had a marathon, weekend where they brought everybody in and we got to hang out as individuals, but we felt like a collective team. They brought Emily Infeld in. We got a FaceTime from Alphine. It was just really cool. I think they're trying to, show people that it's okay if you're doing it differently than what you might see in the team structure. Like, that's okay. And I think that's super awesome. So it made total sense, and nothing else made sense. Like, in the moment, I'm like, Brooks is it again. And I was super happy about it because, I love Brooks. I love the people there. And then the shoes, once I put the spikes on and the super shoes, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've been missing out. These are great. So it was really cool to see like the leaps they've made too in product and tech, because that was definitely noticeable. I didn't really get shoes from Brooks in terms of the racing shoes since 2019. So I've been out of the scene there for like 5 years, and they've just made insane leaps, I feel.
A lot has happened in the 5 years.
Yes, definitely. It's like when, you leave a school and then they get a new playground and a new basketball gym, and you're like, what the heck? It just took me leaving to no, but it's so cool. And I feel like you see this across a lot of brands too. Like, the landscape everybody's getting a little bit closer, which I think is great. I feel like the average runner and the consumer too now has access to this tech, and you just see, New York getting 200,000 applicants, and these races are just getting so big, and people are embracing running, and it's so cool that people that are coming at it from all different levels can have access to this tech as well. I think it's awesome.
I agree. Before we wrap up, you mentioned you have 2 races coming up that are very different.
Yeah.
The 10 at the end of this month, and then a little race in Boston next month.
Little tiny race in Boston, yeah.
One question, I have an idea on this, but I'd like to get your kind of pro take on it.
Okay.
I think that the half marathon is closer to a 10K than it is a marathon. What do you think about that?
Oh, for sure. At least how my body feels and the approach to it, I would agree with that. We were clicking off 5:0s lows. I think we had a few 5:04 miles, a few maybe one day I'll get to that at the marathon level, but no, I feel like it's an extended 10K. And the 10, all of these races that I'm doing, the 5K, the 10, the half, they make marathon distance and, not distance, they make marathon pace feel so good. I had 4 by 3 miles at marathon pace this weekend that I thought was going to be a total, it was slightly, it was not great, but those paces felt so good relative to what I'd been doing for 10K and half marathon training. So it's good perspective.
Okay. And then for running the 10, is the goal there to hit a time standard to be able to compete at USA's?
No, if I do, great, but I think it's just a really good primer for Boston. I know I can run closer to 31 flat. I felt like baby deer last year when I was running the 10K. It was just so much it had been so long since I raced on the track. So I feel like this year I'll have that kind of in the rearview mirror. I dusted those cobwebs off, and now I'll be excited to actually compete. And I know it'll go out crazy fast. I'm sure it'll be paced. So I think if I just focus on smart tactics and competing, I'll probably surprise myself. But yeah, I guess that would be an added bonus to get the 10K standard. But again, it's mostly what's going to make me feel really good for Boston and confident going into April.
For Boston, you mentioned earlier that you don't really go into races thinking I want to get top 3 or anything like that. So then what is the mindset going into Boston? For New York, I remember you thinking that you'd like to come in as top American. Mm-hmm. Kind of what are some of the goals for Boston?
Yeah, I think Boston's different. I feel like you have to have that mindset going into, it's not so much like the goal. Like I'm not like, oh, must get top American. It's like, I want to get closer and closer to when like that race really starts with 10K to go, that I'm like in the mix. And I think I need more experience at the world level. So it's like, I kind of have to be vulnerable and not scared to put myself in it and not really worry what's on the other side of that. Like leaving my comfort zone. So I think Boston will be a lot of that. Obviously running smart the first half, just knowing how the course is slightly down for the first 10K or so. And then a lot of the tough things happen in the latter half of the race. But no, I want to be competitive. I'd love to have that top American spot. I want to stay in like well under the top 10 and maybe even in the top 5 at a world major. So yeah, we're getting there. I feel like New York was a big learning experience. I was pretty overwhelmed. I was really nervous, which I hadn't been up until that point. So I'm glad I learned so much from New York to take into Boston, and it definitely helps having had a run on the course and spending time in Boston earlier this year for the 5K that I did. So I had some intel there.
I know we're running a little bit short on time, but I did want to touch on one last subject.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like, you kind of have a career that keeps bumping paths with Des Linden. And so like in Orlando, you've mentioned previously that like she gave you words of encouragement going into that kind of like the later stages of the race. And then she also kind of gave you a little bit of a chuckle in New York about a little bit of the bib issue.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Des at all about Boston, given that she has such great history there?
You know, I probably should. But, no, it's so funny. Like those moments from Des, they're not really like planned, and I don't really, she's always made it known like, hey, if you ever need anything, like reach out. But the cool thing about Des is like, she can tell when you're in, I don't know, she just kind of looks out for the people in the sport that have come after her. And I feel like the moments where I needed it, she didn't know how much I needed it. And like even on the bus on the way to New York, the start line, the bus was 30 minutes late leaving the hotel even to get all the way out there. So everybody was kind of like, what's going on? Des was so chill, had her headphones on, like unfazed. And we were all kind of following her around like, you know, lost puppy dogs, like, Des, what do we do? And, you know, and she just took a beat, like on the bus, we were on the way over, and she was just like, you got this, like, just run your race. Like, it'll go out slow. You'll warm up. It'll be like, she just, it's funny, like how it's happened. Like she just takes the time to, out of her day where she's also got 26.2 ahead of her to just shoot a few like words of encouragement your way. And Orlando was awesome. She yelled at me like across the course and gave me like the little kick in the butt that I needed when I was feeling sorry for myself. And the finish line, there's been so many cool moments, and she's been somebody that I've, you know, grabbed a beer with over the last like 5 years or so a few times, and grabbed some miles with when she's in Phoenix. So I've looked up to her for a long time. She knows that. She's great.
And the last thing I'll do to round out today is something that, in doing research and preparing for this talk today, I've heard you talk repeatedly about you needing like your people around you to be at your best.
Yeah.
I'd love it if you want to take a moment to thank any people in your circle or the people that have been around you that have helped you get to where you are now.
Oh man, I love that. Well, my husband's been awesome. We started dating when I wasn't like just the runner. I was kind of coming out of the competing in end of 2019 when we started dating, and then COVID happened. So it was just like a funny time to like get to know each other, because I felt like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this whole chunk of my life that has been what I've been doing, like the competing on the road, altitude camps, like that's not a part of my life right now. And I feel like he's not getting to know the real me. But then once I started racing again, it was like nothing but like, yeah, let's do this. It's been like an us journey, and he's been at every race. I try to like ditch him at home, but he wants to come out to every single one, which is so cool. and he does hard things in his life that I try to be there for him for, and it's just really cool. But I would just say, man, my parents have been amazing. They've been watching me run for over 20 years now, and they gave me tough love when I did leave Seattle. Like, hey, you have a marketing degree from Stanford. Like, maybe we use that. Like, running will always be there, but like, they've just given me the perspective that I've needed at tough times. But like, that's what parents are for, and they've been amazing. And my friends and teammates, everybody who's just been there, cheering from home or on the sidelines, I couldn't do it without them. But yeah, there's so many people. I could rattle it all off. I've been watching the Oscars and all those shows. I'm like, how do they do it in like 20 seconds before the music comes on? It's like, cue the music. But
well, I think you did it very graciously. And I'd say thanks to Jess's team. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you. Thanks so much. That was so nice.
All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you race in Boston. Good luck for the rest of your training.
Oh, thank you so much. Will you be there? Will you be racing?
I won't be. I raced it once a couple of years ago. That's good enough for me, but I'll be there. I'll be in town.
Okay, awesome. We'll have to hang out.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much.